Have you ever wondered why, just when you believe God is finally about to answer your prayers, everything seems to become harder instead of easier? You pray with greater sincerity, yet new obstacles appear. You try to remain faithful, yet disappointment seems to follow every step. Doors that once looked promising suddenly close, and the future feels more uncertain than ever. In those moments, it is easy to assume that something has gone wrong. Maybe God has forgotten you. Maybe you misunderstood his direction. Maybe your faith simply was not strong enough. But what if the opposite is true? What if the greatest resistance often appears just before God reveals one of his greatest blessings? Throughout Scripture, we discover a remarkable pattern. Before God entrusted his people with greater responsibility, deeper influence, or extraordinary promises, he first tested their faith. Those tests were never designed to destroy them. They were designed to prepare them. James 1 reminds us, "The testing of your faith produces perseverance." Notice what Scripture does not say. It does not say God wastes your struggles. It says he uses them to shape something far more valuable than immediate comfort. Understanding this truth can completely change the way you see your present season. The first sign God may be testing your faith before your biggest blessing is that he allows your certainty to disappear while asking your trust to grow. Imagine someone who carefully planned every step of life. They prayed over every decision and believed they finally knew where God was leading. Then, almost without warning, the path became unclear. Opportunities disappeared, familiar routines changed, and answers became difficult to find. Their confidence in their own understanding slowly faded. This is exactly what happened to Abraham. God called him to leave everything familiar without showing him the final destination. Hebrews 11 tells us that Abraham obeyed even though he did not know where he was going. His greatest test was not whether he could see the future. It was whether he could trust the God who already could. But here is what many believers never realize. God often removes certainty because certainty can quietly replace dependence. When every detail is visible, faith is no longer required. Sometimes the greatest evidence that God is preparing you is not that you understand more, but that you are learning to trust more. Not perfect clarity, deeper confidence. The second sign is that obedience becomes more costly than you expected. I once heard about a believer who prayed for God to use their life in greater ways. They expected exciting opportunities and immediate progress. Instead, God began asking them to forgive someone who had deeply hurt them, to let go of personal recognition, and to remain faithful in small responsibilities that no one else noticed. None of those requests felt connected to the blessing they had been praying for. Yet every act of obedience quietly reshaped their heart. Think about Joseph. Before he stood before Pharaoh, he faithfully served as a slave and later as a prisoner. His circumstances did not reflect God's promise, but his obedience never stopped. Colossians 3 encourages believers to work wholeheartedly, as though serving the Lord rather than people. God often watches how we handle hidden assignments before he entrusts visible ones. The deeper truth is this: your greatest breakthrough may not begin with public success. It may begin with private obedience that nobody else ever sees, not recognition, faithfulness. The third sign is that waiting begins to reveal what truly lives inside your heart. Delays have a way of exposing attitudes we never knew were there. A season that lasts longer than expected can uncover impatience, fear, pride, or even quiet disappointment with God. Yet those discoveries are not meant to shame you. They are invitations for God to transform the places that still need his grace. Imagine a woman who prayed faithfully for years for one particular opportunity. At first, every prayer centered on receiving the answer. But as the waiting continued, she noticed something changing inside her. Her conversations with God became less about getting what she wanted and more about becoming the person he wanted her to be. That quiet transformation was more valuable than she first realized. David experienced something similar while waiting to become king. Although Samuel had already anointed him, David spent years serving, fleeing danger, and refusing to seize the throne through his own efforts. Psalm 27 reflects the lesson he learned: wait for the Lord, be strong, and take heart. Waiting was never empty. It was shaping the heart that would one day carry the crown. If this message is speaking to your life today, consider subscribing and write in the comments, "God is strengthening my faith." Stay with me because the final three signs reveal the deepest work God often does before a breakthrough, and they may completely change how you see your current season. The fourth sign is that God asks you to release something you thought you could never live without. This test often feels confusing because the very thing you treasure most may become the thing God places in your open hands. Abraham experienced this when God asked him to offer Isaac. The Lord never desired Isaac's destruction. He desired Abraham's complete trust. Sometimes God lovingly reveals whether our confidence rests in his gifts or in his presence. The blessing should never become greater than the blesser. Not possession, surrender. The fifth sign is that your peace begins to grow even before your circumstances improve. This may seem unexpected because most people assume peace comes after the answer arrives. Yet Philippians 4 describes a peace that guards the heart before every problem disappears. I remember hearing about a believer whose situation remained unchanged for months, yet friends noticed something different. The fear that once controlled every conversation had slowly been replaced by quiet confidence in God's faithfulness. The miracle had already begun inside before it became visible outside. God often prepares you to carry the blessing by first teaching you to rest in Him without it. Not outward change, inward transformation. The sixth and final sign is that your faith remains steady even when you still cannot see the outcome. This is where many of God's greatest servants were tested. Noah built the ark before rain ever fell. Moses stood before the Red Sea before the waters parted. The disciples trusted Jesus before they understood everything he was doing. Hebrews 11 reminds us that faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. God is not looking for perfect people. He is looking for hearts willing to trust Him one step at a time. As you reflect on these six signs, remember this. God's tests are never designed to push you away. They are preparing you to receive what your present faith is growing into. So keep praying, keep obeying, and keep trusting His perfect timing. If this message encouraged you, write, "I will trust God's process" in the comments. Share this with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe for more biblical encouragement.